My friend opened and closed his garage door at dinner from his phone. And I was like, just imagine telling your grandparents that.
I don't need that technology. What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown, KBTX senior Texas A&M sports writer. I'm here with Chief Meteorologist Max Crawford.
That was a very podcasty/AM radio voice that you just did that in.
Well, all right. And we got
now the vibe's
we got Nicole Griffith, sports reporter over here. Nicole,
Well,
how are you?
I'm good. This is episode 20, so Travis has got his voice pretty
I am
down.
dialed in.
Man, I sure hope so. We're gonna listen back to this. Everyone's mic quality is gonna be great. It's gonna be wonderful.
I got that good voice fry, you know, vocal fry. This is the Aggie Game Day Extra podcast. We are out of our football midseason form because football's now officially over, at least for A&M perspective, and really the state of Texas perspective. But we have basketball. We have baseball coming up. We're gonna scattershoot a little bit. We're just gonna kind of talk about what we feel like, and maybe a little weather talk today. I don't know. There's some crazy weather.
Yeah.
Maybe coming or not coming. I don't know.
Well, the first time I'm not in a suit too.
I know. Well, I know. This is a button down.
This is a hard working day.
Yeah.
We are comfy clothes ready to go.
Yeah, exaczly.
Typing things up.
We need to
storm.
just start a fire over in the corner.
Why
you
not?
know,
It is honestly.
have some apple cider. So we're gonna do that. And then in the second half of this, Tyler Shaw and I did a little recap of the football season. Talk a little bit about the differences and where the two programs are between Texas A&M and Texas, and that we did that from the field at AT&T Stadium at the Cotton Bowl last week. So stay tuned for that in our little second segment of the day. So Max.
Yes, I'm not mocking you. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm making faces at you when you're talking about the other team.
I figure you're always making faces at me, just in general.
Yes.
You've had quite an eventful social media couple of weeks here.
Oh.
You have been bashing all the haters.
Yeah.
Not really. Why should I not trust my Apple weather app?
Well, okay, so if you're going to ask it that way, I thought you were maybe going to say, like, why should I delete it? I guess the answer is kind of the same. Why should you not trust it? Mainly because those stock weather apps, for the most part, and they've gotten a little bit better, just pull straight up model data. It, like, finds your location, and then it finds the model data, and then it puts out a number. And so for, like...
What is model data?
Model data, like from weather models, these supercomputers that take initial conditions observed across the country, across the world, in some of the bigger models cases, and they plug in all this data and do these equations for us, and they project things out into the future. Some models use that based on what we call analogs, past events, how the weather has played out beforehand. Some just use all of that data for how winds are blowing, what temperatures are in certain places, and they just say, okay, 5 days out, what's the atmosphere going to look like? And they can do it from temperature to humidity to pressure, and all that ties together. And of course, it can predict precip. And so I think even when you're just talking about that, you're like, man, that's got to fall apart at some point, right? But it's actually gotten pretty good, especially within like 3 to 5 days' time. And so, if you're using a weather app just to, like, I don't know what the temperature is outside right now. I don't know what the high is going to be today. If that's all you need it for, you probably don't need to delete it. You can probably still trust it some days, most days, I would say. But where we run into trouble, I think, is in a month like January or February. Sometimes people will open it up and they'll be like, oh, I've got this and that coming up in a week. And here in Texas, soccer season is like in January and February. They're trying to play games outside, and next Tuesday, 70% chance of widespread snow. And people start screenshotting that and posting it on the interwebs and saying this is what it says. And sometimes people attribute that to that's what I have said. And so that's where some of the frustration comes into play. But look, I'm not telling you have to delete it, but I am saying if you want something that is very often going to be more accurate, more personalized, Sometimes a little bit more. Let's try to find the word here. A little bit more. We're gonna have to cut this part.
No, keep going.
Oh, well, I can't find the flippin' word, Travis.
A little more accurate? A little more localized?
Yeah, well, for sure more localized. But I guess what I'm saying is like a little more honest, honestly, about how things could play out. I think you're going to get that way better from a local news station or a local forecaster that you trust. For example, in Houston, if you listen to us from Houston, Space City Weather does a very, very good job at personalized forecasts. They're very smart people. Put it in blog form and stuff like that. I don't know if they have an app, but we do. And we cater it to you. And I will always stand up for local news and local weather, and one of the easiest ways that you can support local news, other than listening to this podcast, is downloading a local news or local weather app and using it.
So, I mean, but it's I was going to make the joke.
Man, that was boring.
No. I'm fascinated by this.
Nicole has fallen asleep.
Nope.
So
I had some tea this afternoon. I'm ready to go.
Well, and you might appreciate this a little bit from like the Twitter sphere in the sports. I was going to make the joke that the Apple app is kind of like the big game boomer of weather, because we do like when you're on Twitter, you'll see like random sports no-name accounts, anonymous accounts that are trying to spout off news about, this transfer player or this injury or this whatever. And you're like, I mean, sometimes I guess a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then and they get it right. But a lot of times you're like, no, I know that is absolutely not the case. And of course, us as like real journalists, sometimes we know information, but it's off the record or in background. So it's not something that we can report right then. We need another source or we need something like that. But you look at it and you're like, well, that's just not even true.
Or the parody accounts that have the same name as the person, and then they post like a transfer portal or a draft or and you just right away retweet it, or you just are like, oh, this player's going in the draft or this player is transferring, and then you're like, you click on the page and it has 200 followers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think even in that same vein, honestly, like some of the main outlets can get themselves in trouble for doing stuff like that too, like posting quite literally unserious things because they know there will be engagement to go along with that. Because there's a whole thing, like being a broadcast meteorologist and understanding that so much of our job is on social media and the internet now, there's a balance that you have to find between, clickbait and hype and like telling that story well. And I think we're constantly learning as communicators that you kind of do need a hook. Like it's like when we talk about what do we call this podcast whenever we push it out, it's because we want you to listen to it. There's nothing inherently wrong with that.
And the numbers say when we put something like, does A&M have a quarterback controversy, that people listen.
Yeah, and that's kind of just the way that it is. And until we get like a really good following, we're probably going to keep doing that. And so that's why I understand why even like weather
until we get.
Yeah, we're building it. We're building it.
Hey,
the people who are listening.
I know.
We are on pace to get 10,000 listeners.
Let's do it.
By the end of basketball season, really.
Okay, we're going to get there. But like, I guess what I'm trying to say is even some of us in the broadcast industry that pride ourselves on being the ones who are like the real sources for weather information, like sometimes we make a post that ends up catching fire and we didn't really fathom the implications of it, like posting a clip or just a picture of a frozen piece of model data in time that says snow here, and in the caption it says like, look, this is just one model or something like that. But by the time that image is, the message has already been taken from you. And I think even like reliable outlets from sports to weather, anything like that, can take something like that. And some people know what they're doing from an engagement perspective, and it blows up. So, like for example, the other day, I think it was Fox Sports posted their like top 10 all-time Heisman winners, and they put Travis Hunter at number 2. And I guarantee you the person who made that graphic did not actually think that Travis Hunter was the second best, most impressive Heisman winner ever. But they knew that people would be talking about it, they'd be quote tweeting it, they'd be replying to it, and therefore it would show up on other people's pages, and therefore that would monetize either just clicks or just folks seeing that, so that eventually leads to more clicks. So like, and we as consumers, as media consumers, I think are starting to understand that, but I think a lot of us do not. I've gone on like 2 rants now.
I appreciate that. I am a big media literacy advocate. So let's get into this. And I want, because there is all this talk of snow, I want to know from the experts if we are going to get snow next week. Nicole, are we going to get snow next week?
Nicole's probably one of the more prepared people.
Well,
honestly, she knows what snow is.
I have my long sleeve on. I have my sweater. I do have my snow scraper in my laundry room. I've not put it in the car. The last week when it kind of froze a little bit,
You're like, ooh,
I just defrosted the windows, and 2 minutes later it was gone. But I am from the Dakotas, the southern one. And it is a high of 4 next week there.
Yeah. I don't know, thank you.
Did you get that from the Apple weather
A
app?
high of 4.
No,
Celsius?
no comment.
Hey, and and I'm sure it's even worse in places like that, like in Omaha, Nebraska, where stuff changes. People say, you don't like the weather in Texas, wait a day. That's actually...
That's the Midwest.
I was going to say, that's Nebraska. That's South Dakota.
Yeah, my mom,
Texas.
I think she's looking for the next weekend she can come down and thaw out.
When I was in Dallas last week with one Tyler Shaw, who
weather coverage, you guys
we had weather coverage. I had terrible weather. Maybe I can drop the video of me just completely blurring out some snowmen because Tyler wanted me to get fancy, and I'm a newspaper reporter right here.
You need to get. Do you have gloves?
Do I have gloves? I mean, yes, I have gloves.
I saw a photo of you scraping the snow off the car, and there was no gloves involved.
Oh, well, I didn't bring gloves to that. Like, I didn't expect to be outside that. I wanted to throw a snowball at Tyler while we were doing our weather shots. He did not appreciate that. So,
I think it would have been okay TV.
But he was talking about how, because he went to school in Utah, he worked in, is it Montana or Wyoming?
Wyoming.
Those states just kind of blur together
Ooh.
for me. And they used to talk, he has like a blanket for his car that keeps the windshield from freezing, and like a heavy duty scraper, and like I normally would just use like an old hotel key card that I had left in my wallet.
A card, more often than not, will do the trick down here. But like maybe once or twice.
I've used brooms before. Like had to broom off the snow off my car before I could scrape it.
And that's what very rarely happens here. It does, like sometimes where there's a layer of frost and then there's snow on top of it. Like 2021, you had to do that a couple of different times. But I would say once a year at the absolute most that we talk about that. It is a pretty crazy winter if you have a setup like that.
You know what was also frigid this week? The Texas A&M men's basketball shooting last night.
Sports
in Kentucky. That's what we call a segue in the business.
Transitions.
What have you, Nicole, you haven't been on in a little bit. What's your takes of this men's basketball season? Because it has its ups and downs.
Mm-hmm. I think not only does it have its ups and downs, they play differently each half, right? So you get they will be down against Southern, right? Let's go all the way back. They're down 17 to Southern, but then they're able to come back and win that game, take care of that at home. And then, they're playing down at Oklahoma on the road. They're able to come back. So it's like, no matter what happens in the first half, it's like I save those clips for filing, but I know my highlights are going to come from the second half when a whole other story unfolds. And so I was at not the Texas game. What was most recent? Home. Alabama. So I was at the Alabama game shooting that, and I had good first half highlights, but it's I know I'm going to have to save all of this for the second half. So the team is, I don't know if they're trying to find their identity without Wade, because I feel like Wade being off isn't going to be a long-term thing, but you do want to have an identity without your star guard. But you don't want to have a full new identity without him. He is the main nucleus of this team, and so you're able to see players step up. Zurich step up, Manny Obaski step up against last night on the road at Kentucky. Payne, the whole time against Alabama, he was just throwing it back. It was just a body on body down low. So it's seeing who steps up and finding that consistency. I don't know if they quite know their rotation because Buzz just rotates so many people and he gives everyone a chance. It's just who has the hot hand that night. And no matter what happens in the first half, it's like, let's see what happens in the second.
Yeah, I will very much give them credit for that, as frustrating as it can be to watch. I guess for somebody who doesn't know ball that well, I will fully admit that, especially in terms of basketball. For me, sometimes it's very frustrating to watch that style of play, but there's also always that little thought, like you said, in the back of your head that you're like, yeah, but this game's not really over until it is literally over. Because that style of play can all of a sudden lead to turnovers, like in a good, like turnovers for us, and going on runs, and if we're able to shoot, all of a sudden we're right back in it. And I don't know. I think the thing that bothered me the most about the Kentucky game was it just seemed like if I'm holding Travis by the forehead and like just holding his hair right here, and he's trying to take swings at me. Just I had us at arm's length the entire time.
You do that to me once a week, so
just to remind
he Heisman's you once a week.
every Monday.
Just to remind me my place.
Yeah. It seemed like they were toying with us a little bit. It seemed like, from my perspective at the gym when I was just walking on the treadmill, I was like, is Kentucky really trying? And we looked to be flailing and trying our absolute best.
I see a couple things. I think they are, I don't want to say missing their identity, but they're missing their best player in Wade Taylor. And so you're going to have to change things. The way that it worked the 2 games prior is that it was kind of like riding a baseball team riding a pitcher with a hot hand. Zurich Phelps was doing a really good job at getting to the basket, finishing at the basket, getting fouled, and then he hit a couple of threes, especially that big clutch one at the end of the game against Oklahoma. And so he mitigated the loss of Wade. Well, he still had 21 points in the game last night, but they were sporadic. They didn't really come in clumps where they're disjointed. They didn't produce runs. They were kind of all over the place, and so they weren't able to really get back into the game. But the bigger problem is Kentucky just proved to be a bad matchup for A&M because they had some of the biggest bodies down low that A&M has faced this year. And so they went at Texas, they went at Alabama with a physical game in the post, and they had some with Henry Coleman. The way Pharrell Payne is not a big guy, but he can play physical against guys that are of the same size and physicality as him. But those guys down low in the Kentucky looked like, defensive ends on steroids. Those guys were big, and they couldn't play since they stopped hitting shots from outside and Zurich wasn't finishing those dribble penetrations. The next option is to get it down low to Pharrell, work the paint, and they weren't able to do that. Plus, they only shot 5 for 12 on shots at the rim last night, which that kind of harkens back to the team last season when they were able to get to the rim, but like Tyrese Radford, Wade Taylor just couldn't finish those shots. And they have been finishing those shots this year.
Yeah. And Nicole, I promise I'll let you talk.
Oh, thank you.
I think if we had beaten Alabama, especially a second upset without Wade, I think you'd call it an upset because we're missing our star player against Oklahoma, and I think you would absolutely call it an upset if we had beaten Alabama on Saturday. I think if we had beaten them and then gone to Kentucky and kind of laid an egg, I don't know that we laid an egg last night, but you know what I mean, and lost the way that we lost, I don't think I would be frustrated really hardly at all. Be like, dude, that's the 3rd game without Wade. This is clearly not our team at full power, and we beat Oklahoma and Alabama, in this hypothetical situation. And you know what could have gotten us to beat Alabama? As if we were a little more technically sound at the line. And so I think that is ultimately the most frustrating thing, is that this is supposed to be a very disciplined group, very hard-nosed, in your face on defense. Yes, we'll get fouled. I feel like in order to be a team that plays that style, draws fouls, goes to the line a lot, you got to make those shots. And again, I don't know ball, and I know I can't make a free throw myself, but I feel like you should be able to make a free throw.
And Buzz argues they did enter the game shooting 70% really from the free throw line, 75 in high major games, but you're getting into the games that matter, and it's been 2 games now that the funny thing is Pharrell Payne is probably their best free throw shooter over the last stretch, and he entered conference play shooting like 50% from the line, which he's not necessarily, it's good when he hits free throws, but he's not necessarily the one that you want to depend on for hitting free throws. So they're on a 2-game losing streak after a 9-game winning streak. Is this who they are moving forward, or do you think once they get Wade back, it all kind of checks back into place?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things about that. So this is who they are without Wade. You have to have that caveat. There's no timetable on Wade. We'll see when he comes back and see how the team rebounds from that. But A&M going 28 from 48 from the free throw line. They're bringing in an LSU team now next who just beat Arkansas from the free throw line. And so I don't know the number off the top of my head, but LSU, I think they only missed like a handful of free throws last night. And so last night would have been Tuesday of this recording. But A&M, it's hard. Like, you can't say you have to make your you can say you have to make your free throws, but no one's going to shoot 100%. But it is frustrating when, you have these teams, like the environment that was at Reed Arena and the sellout that it was and the top 10 matchup that it was, for a game could have been won from the line.
Yeah. I think once they get Wade back, things settle in a little bit. It'll be interesting to see how that dynamic between Zurich and Wade settles in, because Zurich is going to be the high usage guy without Wade, and Wade is going to be the high usage guy when he comes back. How that settles out in who gets the ball, who takes control of things. I'm kind of tired of the Manny Obaseki ISO ball. I feel like that results into a turnover more than it does a made shot. He is a great asset to the team, and I think he when the game dictates that the driving lanes are open, he can absolutely dominate a game. Yeah. But I think he's pushing that a little too much. So that'll be an interesting thing to see forward. To me, I don't think this Wade issue is going to be a long-term thing. I would expect him back sooner than later.
He's been at the games where they've traveled and has been picking up the bench and stuff like that. So it's clearly whatever it is, it's not clearly, but I think whatever it is something that is nagging, and they're saying, look, we need you 100% so that we can take you for the long haul. The meat of the conference schedule, the conference tournament, and then obviously the dance after that.
I would be surprised if he's out longer than if he's out too much longer. I would be surprised. We'll wrap up with this. A&M, as expected, A&M baseball comes out. D1 baseball's #1 team in the country.
I knew you weren't going to want to talk football. Just knew it.
Did you want to talk football?
No, let's talk baseball first.
Football is on the him and Tyler
Football's
talk
over.
about it.
Football's over. It's done.
Over.
It's out of my head.
We need a break from it, Max.
Go Detroit Lions.
Oh, you wanted to talk that kind of football?
No, I wanted to talk Aggie football.
Okay. Well,
Aggie baseball #1.
Aggie baseball #1.
#1.
Is that where they should be?
Where else would they be, right? It is interesting, being #1 preseason. Like, preseason rankings, take it for what they are, right? Like, there have been teams that have been picked last that win the tournament or win the conference, and vice versa. So, but Michael Early, I know he wasn't like grandfathered in as the head coach, but he inherits this team. He was already with this team as the assistant. Okay, well, the nation's on notice. You are preseason #1. Go and get that. I know one thing. I will not be staying 14 days in a row in Omaha. So whatever happens,
some relief.
I will come up later. I will go up and take a break. No, that Omaha is great. It was just 14 straight days.
And doing it potentially 2 years in a row does sound.
I'm already thinking that #1 that I saw in the preseason. I was like, well, Might as well book our Omaha hotels now.
I am a baseball guy. The College World Series is the best thing you can cover. I love it. I love going, even if there's not teams that I watch it when there's not teams I cover or anything in there. The 14 days was just a beating.
It's a lot.
Number one, what do you think?
I don't really like it. I think it's cool for the guys and stuff like that, but I just, I don't like a preseason number one, because how often does that actually translate? Which, like baseball especially, it does not matter. It really doesn't. I think there's a reason they were preseason number one by multiple outlets, and I think the reason is the bats. I mean, if three of our guys go on a cold streak at the same time,
the bats that are in like Kyle Field.
Yep, the Kyle Field bats are the reason we are number one. If three of our guys go on a cold streak, the rest of the lineup,
the other six will be hitting 400.
Like, and so I think from an offensive perspective, it's awesome. I think Blue Ball Park is going to be amazing this year, because there's going to be a lot of bubbles. Like, there's going to be a lot of offense. I think it's going to be really fun. There's some concern with pitching, I suppose, but like, we have Prager back, and so there's our guy. Building behind that, I'm not going to play like I know the other dudes, especially with Sadeo, being out for the season. But I think the games that I'm going to go to, I think we're going to have some fun.
Because you're going to be there.
Yeah, and I'll be blowing bubbles, and Mason will be too. But are we going to win a couple of like 12-11, 15-14 type of games? I think it's possible, for sure.
I think that's where college baseball is now too.
You're right.
But yeah, the biggest thing for me is the bats. It is the number one lineup in the country. I still have some question marks about the pitching staff. They, when it got to the end of the season, and it kind of gets like this most of the time, but Jim Schlossnagle had about 5 guys that he depended on, and he ran those guys. I mean, Evan Oschenbeck, man, that dude threw and through and through and through.
Put him on make a plaque. I don't know. Do something. Do something to honor that dude.
I think it is one of the strongest teams in the nation. They deserve the number one ranking, coming off with who they brought back and coming off being the national runner-up. But I am interested in seeing how well the pitching shapes up, especially the starting rotation beyond Prager.
Yeah, and I mean, Nicole, you mentioned this, like being grandfathered into it, but it's still his first year as a head coach, and that's tough. And look at what with Elko, like we were rocking and rolling, and I don't know that I would necessarily contribute our unsuccessful finish to the season to his coaching and experience, but I bet it has something to do with it.
And pitching coach, like coaching matters in baseball,
absolutely,
especially on the mound. You look 2 years ago at where A&M's pitching staff was compared to last year, and it was really mostly a lot of the same guys. It was just a new voice, a new guy calling pitches, a new guy working with those pitchers. They're going to have another new guy this year, granted a guy with a lot of experience, but it'll just to see how that philosophy takes shape is going to be interesting. Max, I'm gonna fire up Crawford Cam here, and just get your close up. Talk football.
we didn't have to. I mean, like, there's really not, I suppose.
Put a bow on it, Max.
You gotta put a bow on it, as Nicole and I have said in our banter for the past 3 weeks. Putting a bow on the year. I don't want to put a bow on it because I want to talk about it again next week.
Well, then we'll just unwrap it.
Yeah.
We'll put a bow on this podcast by talking about football. I don't think that there's really any big updates. I think I am a little bit. I don't want to say disappointed, because I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus or anything, but I am a little bit surprised that there wasn't any real staff movement within Elko's staff. I'll just kind of leave it at that. I think you know what I'm talking about. I believe since at least you and I, Travis, have spoken, we got a couple portal additions, including a receiver that I know a lot of teams really, really wanted. So I feel pretty good about where we're headed, especially if I think Trey Zune has to decide maybe today if he's going to declare for the draft or not. So I like the nucleus that we have built. I like the people that are returning. I have some questions about especially the defensive line going into next season, and even more obviously, I think defensive backs. But I think our offense is going to look pretty sharp. assuming everybody's back and healthy, I feel pretty good about it. And I know that like we could all use a little bit of a break, especially like kind of going on a losing streak to end the season. But I tell you what, man, once spring practices start back up, you know how I am. Both of you know how I am. I'm going to be back to predicting 10+ wins in no time at all.
You asked me, you said about the spring game, you said, do you think, I'm trying to rephrase it, or remember how you said it, but you're like, what are the odds that after the spring game I am picking over or under 10 wins?
Yeah.
I was like, yes, you're going to be doing that. You are the Kool-Aid. Yeah. You love it. The spring game's going to happen, and we're going to be, A&M is going to be national champions in your mind.
I'd settle for a berth to start.
Well, the national championships in your mind, how many national championship banners do you have hanging in your mind? From past.
The only one that I was coherent for was the Rangers.
Okay. Well, I was just talking about A&M, how many preseason national championship banners are hanging in your head and collecting dust?
This year for sure.
To say, but probably 2011. When I think we came in preseason number 6. It was right after we had a miracle finish to the season in 2010. Tannehill was rocking and rolling. We still had Cyrus Gray, et cetera, so forth. 2011, maybe 2013. I also thought running it back with Johnny, we can do this. And I would say honestly, the most recent one after that was probably 2020. I think we had pretty high-ish expectations then. But, yeah, I don't know.
Okay. That's more than I thought.
Yeah, well, that's because I am who I am.
Well, on the other side of a little break here, Tyler Shaw and I, we're going to go back in time a little bit, but talk about some of the same stuff. We were on the field at AT&T Stadium after covering the Cotton Bowl and talked a little bit about where this Texas A&M football program is in comparison to Texas after they just got done with their first year in the SEC. So we'll be back with that. Right here on the field of AT&T Stadium, Texas's inaugural season in the SEC came to a close with a loss to Ohio State in the College Football Playoff semifinals, also known as the Cotton Bowl. I'm KBTX senior A&M writer Travis Brown alongside Tyler Shaw. We got to witness the end of the SEC season here as Texas fell. And it kind of raises that question as we kind of pivot everything back to Texas A&M. When Texas was going to come into the conference this year, the conversation was, is Texas in a better position in year one than A&M has been in 12 years in the SEC? Now that we have kind of a full painting of the season, Tyler, what do you think?
I mean, it's kind of A&M's worst nightmare right now. I'm not going to lie, because they, when they left for the SEC, they always kind of had that over A&M. We're in the better conference, or they had A&M had that over Texas. We're in the better conference. Texas has struggled the better part of the last decade. Not that A&M has flourished in that decade, but they had the that kind of carrot of we're in the SEC. We are in the best football conference in America. Well, the playing field's even. They're both in the same conference, and Texas is having more success right now. I mean, there's no question about that. When you make it to the semifinals, one game away from the national championship 2 years in a row, and things seem to be trending upwards as right now for the Longhorns.
I tend to have to agree, but I do think when you look at the end of the season compared to where A&M was at the beginning, it was year one under Mike Elko. They'd just given Jimbo Fisher the biggest contract the world had, or the biggest buyout the world had ever seen, after the biggest contract the world had ever seen. And everyone thought that this was going to be a stereotypical first season. And I think through the majority of the season, the A&M team overproduced, overexceeded expectations, having a shot to play into the SEC title game for the first time. And they never even been close to the SEC title game in the first year. So in some ways, Texas is ahead of A&M in year one in the SEC, but I think A&M has taken a step forward as well. Now, some of that isn't necessarily A&M. Some of that is the SEC doesn't have divisions anymore.
Right. And
they don't have to face a dynasty Alabama anymore to get to the SEC title game. But I think all things considered, both A&M and Texas are situated not too bad in the SEC moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the playing field was kind of even this year. It was wide open, a wide open conference, a lot of parity. So, yeah, A&M was close. They were close. Texas right now is a little bit ahead of them. But, yeah, that's not to say moving forward in the future A&M can't catch that. I mean, they were just a win against their rivals away from being in Atlanta. That would have flipped the entire script of this season. So, I mean, with the rivalry being back and everything, those head-to-head wins are going to just mean everything in the world to both these fan bases. So that moving forward, I think, once you start counting, how many of these head-to-head wins they start having against each other in the SEC, we'll kind of tell, where both programs stand. But you're right. I mean, year one under Elko, I think you could count as a success. But you also look at year one in the SEC. A&M flourished in their year one in the SEC, just kind of like Texas has in their year one. Time will tell over a period of time how Texas does moving forward into the SEC.
When you compare these two programs, I think the biggest thing to consider is moving forward in this new era of college football, which has become super cliche, money is going to equate to wins. Both of these programs have money. A&M got to a place to be a power player in the money realm because they moved to the SEC and got some of those big TV contracts and got some of the big marquee games, got higher recruits and got people re-engaged in the program. I think while both schools will point fingers at each other and say one school is better off than the other, both schools are better off than certain parts of the SEC because they are two of the biggest, wealthiest athletic departments in the country.
Right, and because of the I guess, positive trajectory that we've kind of seen from A&M, I think at least for the short future, both A&M and Texas are going to be continually in the conversation, in that mix for the playing for an SEC title. I really do think that could happen. And for the game and for the fan perspective, I mean, that would, if we get this last game of the season, Texas A&M spot in Atlanta, multiple times, I mean, that's just going to be awesome moving forward.
What stood out to you about this Cotton Bowl experience? The game tonight, everything that the Cotton Bowl this week?
Well, first off, the hospitality. I think we've talked about that. Second to none, if you're covering the Cotton Bowl, was awesome. What was crazy is just how much one play kind of changes this whole thing. I mean, we look at, Texas looking to score, and it kind of reminds me, when they scored and then, Texas almost tied the game, but then Ohio State makes it a 2-score game by that. It kind of reminds me of when A&M was driving down that 4th and goal, and had they scored, that would have, those plays at the goal line just kind of changed everything. Just why, at least I will say we had an entertaining college football semifinal. Both college football semifinals were entertaining.
I believe I said it before the game. Turnovers and inopportune times were going to doom this for the Longhorns.
And that was the most inopportune time.
That was the most inopportune time there, that scoop and score to kind of put it away. I believe it was 83 yards on the defensive end.
Yeah.
You're right. And the kind of interesting thing about this playoffs as a whole is, you have a Texas team that goes out and beats Clemson pretty handily, comes in and has to have an absolute shootout nail-biter against Arizona State. You have Ohio State, who just blows Oregon out of the water, who everybody thought was going to be the national champion, and then comes in here and gets into a dogfight with Texas. And so that you expect, and then the game last night with Penn State and Notre Dame, I mean, that was a rock fight of a football game with two programs that had pretty impressive wins early in the playoffs. So, I think it is a good sign for this 12-team playoff because, some of the early rounds were duds, but that wasn't necessarily indicative of what the full scope of it would be, and you hope that crescendos into a really exciting title game here in a few weeks in Atlanta.
Well, and now you have Notre Dame playing in this title game, who obviously A&M started the season against, and they're going to start next season. They're not going to start next season, but they're going to play early next season as well, which, all the storylines there, I mean, you think about it, right now, I think Ohio State, is playing the best football in the nation. But let's say Notre Dame
I think Notre Dame is playing the best defense in the country.
So let's say if Notre Dame wins, Texas A&M is going to be playing the defending national championship champion in their house next year. Obviously, in a very exciting game. And I think, if Notre Dame wins, for Aggie fans, you can kind of, that loss at the beginning of the season, doesn't, I guess it's one of those really, really good losses.
Here's the thing to me that stood out about the whole Cotton Bowl experience, too, and we kind of have talked about this throughout our time here. The Cotton Bowl was the pinnacle of college football for the state of Texas for years and years and years, and for teams in this region. Like, if you had your best season, you were playing in the Cotton Bowl, and there was just this regional aura around this game. I think we got a little bit of that regional college football flair back with Texas joining the SEC and bringing back the rivalry game between A&M and Texas this year. And with Texas being in this game, coming here, seeing a lot of regional media here, a lot of familiar faces that we get to see and don't get to see in the press box and on the field and everything like that, it felt a little bit nostalgic and a little bit cool, like that regionality of college football was back. Now, the Cotton Bowl isn't necessarily going to host a Texas school every year or be a semifinal. It's going to be in that mix of the playoffs every year. But when you do have a Texas A&M, one of these schools, one of those old Southwest Conference schools in the Cotton Bowl playing another blue chip school from around the country, like it feels old school in a really cool way, and that's kind of what stuck with me through most of this as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of history to it, and it was cool to see every seat. I mean, this place was packed, every seat filled. Even the press box was packed, even, which we haven't seen here in Jerry World at the collegiate level. So I think it was cool to see kind of that scope, this scale of a game brought here to AT&T.
Here's the other most important thing that came out of this. We thought, and I've talked about this in the game recap after that A&M Arkansas game, that beautiful, wonderful, delicious mac and cheese they have in the press. I thought that was going to be the last time I was going to get to savor some of that, and lo and behold,
you got one more treat.
I got one more shot at it. Yeah. So that is really the most important thing to come out of this weekend is one more go at the press box mac and cheese.
Yeah, I'd say so. Well, we thought the Las Vegas Bowl was our last time here on a football field, kind of wrapping up this podcast season. But here we are one last time at the Cotton Bowl with Texas losing to Ohio State, with Ohio State taking on Notre Dame. The national championship college football season almost over. So for one last time this season, for Travis Brown, I'm Tyler Shaw.